Morning, evening, afternoon, and remember, Context is Everything Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a book, a self-help book, Dissolving the Ego and Realizing the Self. Book is out of publication. We're on Chapter 2, which is the mind. Chapter 2 is 33 tidbits, 33 examples of what is the mind. Chapter 1 was 33 examples of what is the ego. So why don't we talk about continuing here, the nature of the mind. What is the mind? Well, here's an example for you of what the mind is. My name's John Michael at the Context is Everything Media Network. Please subscribe if you enjoy. Thank you. The mind is like an infinitely complex processing unit of both internal and external data. The mind naively assumes that it is real me. It is the real me who is searching for truth because it assumes that the ego and self is primarily and is the sole author of intention as well as action, and therefore the arbiter of reality. The mind naively assumes that it is the real me who is searching for truth because it assumes that the ego/self is primarily and is the sole author of intention as well as action, and therefore the arbiter of reality. A person identifies with his body because his mind is experiencing his body, or her. The end point of intellectual investigation arrives at obvious conclusion that the mind and the intellect are each inherently defective and therefore incapable of arriving at absolute truth. And in yesterday's reading, the thing that really kind of stuck out to me was the example of the reason why they're saying the mind is incapable of knowing truth is because if the mind knew truth, then humanity would not engage in war. And that's not because the leaders would be more honest. Now, people will still deceive if the mind is a functional product, but mass society wouldn't fall into groupthink. They would think individually. But groupthink happens when people go on an autopilot. And, you can take examples of plenty of totalitarian regimes where the people fall in line and realize, well, if they were thinking independently on a larger, wider scale, if their mind was true and understood truth, well, those issues wouldn't have arisen in the first place, So, carrying on here, question: what makes thinking so tenacious? What does make thinking so tenacious? I barely even know what that question means. Well, here's the answer. All mental content represents attachments, and underlying are the attachments to the self and the clinging to what is believed to be the source of survival as well as happiness. It is also one's identification. In reality, the source of happiness is the self, and the self is not the ego, capital S, self. Thinking is a processing device with great pragmatic value. It presumes that it knows the data, but it will actually have no limit. Thinking is a processing device with great pragmatic value. It presumes that it knows the data, but it actually has no innate capacity to know. Belief manufactures an imaginary inner knower that becomes the me. Likewise, it manufactures an imaginary doer of deeds, an actor of acts, and an imaginary thinker of thoughts. Each thought actually arises out of nothingness, or a black field of silent mind, and it is not, as presumed, caused by preceding thoughts. Consciousness research confirms that approximately 99% of the mind is silent and only 1% is processing images. The observer self is actually hypnotized by the 1% of activity and identifies with it as me. It is oblivious to the silent 99% of the field because it is invisible, because it is formless. Once thoughts or feelings are labeled as mine, they become magically imbued with presumptive omniscience and an assumed sovereign validity. Thoughts, ideas, and concepts are pragmatic and useful value to worldliness, but with the relinquishment of worldliness, they are excess baggage and have no value. Through self-examination and inward focus, one can discover that all states of consciousness are the result of execution of an option. They are not unchangeable certainties determined by uncontrollable factors at all. This can be discovered by examining how the mind works. The primary defect is, as it always has been, that the design of the human mind renders it intrinsically incapable of being able to tell the truth from falsehood. This single most crucial of all inherited defects lies at the root of all human distress and calamity. The ego and mind presumes and is convinced that the perceptions and interpretations of life experiences and the real thing, and therefore true thing. It also believes by projection that other people see, think, and feel the same way. If they do not, they are mistaken and therefore wrong. Thus, perception reinforces its hold by reification and presumption. Reification, reification, reification and presumption. The dualistic proclivity of the mind prevents the realization of oneness of reality or the occurrence of self-realization, because the dualistic belief system as represented in language presumes that a this is causing a that. It therefore simultaneously and automatically also views the self as being separate and moralistically judged, doer of deeds. This dualistic system of mental processing reinforces the ego positionalities that in turn produce the perceptual illusion of the opposite that stands at the gateway of enlightenment. Although the human mind likes to believe that it is, of course, dedicated to truth, in reality, what it really seeks is confirmation of what it already believes. At some level, I see what you're saying. The ego is innately prideful and does not welcome the revelation that much of its beliefs are merely perceptual illusions, guided by learned ideology. The human mind presumes that commonality is a belief system. The human mind presumes that commonality of belief system is evidence of truth, and of course history is full of obvious examples of the contrary. Just as the physical eye registers images and objects like a camera, the mind is the I, letter I. The mind is the I of the self, which perpetuates the illusion of a unique, separate personal identity that becomes hypothecated to be the originator of thought, intention, desire, and so on. Let me read that one more time. Just as the physical eye registers images and objects like a camera, the mind is the I of the self, which perpetuates the illusion of a unique, separate, personal identity that becomes hypothecated to be the originator of thought, intention, desire, and so on. With relinquishment of the narcissistic illusion, it becomes apparent that all aspects of supposed personal life are actually occurrences that are autonomous and spontaneous. All negative emotions persist because of their secret payoff. When this ego juice is declined, thoughts tend to diminish and then disappear. The mind then tends to go blank, which then brings up the fear of boredom. With observation, it becomes clear that the mind is busy anticipating the future, clinging to the past, or savoring the past to extract pleasure via reruns. Thus, the mind becomes the focus of amusement as doing something. Thus, the mind becomes the focus of amusement as doing something. Because consciousness is formless and devoid of content, it is able to recognize form. Thoughts are only discernible if they move in a field of non-thought. The background of the mind is therefore silence of the field of consciousness itself. In turn, consciousness, which is a field of potential energy, is detectable because it is illuminated by the light of awareness that is the self. The mind has only information and imagination about anything. The mind has only information and imagination about anything. It cannot actually know, because to know is to be that which is known. All else is only speculation and supposition. When the mind is transcended, there is nothing left to ask about. That which is complete lacks nothing, and that completion is self-evident in its allness. Supposition meaning supposings, I would say. Things that you suppose, things that one supposes. Although the personal self likes to think that the thoughts going through the mind are my thoughts, they are actually only the thoughts that prevail and give at the given level of consciousness. Thoughts think themselves. They don't need you at all, just like the body goes about its business on its own. The mind's reality is a fiction. With that realization, it loses its reign as the arbiter of reality. Through the eyes of the ego, life is a kaleidoscope of consciousness-changing attractions and repulsions, fear, and transient pleasures. If you watch what your mind is really doing, you'll see that it is always trying to get one up on the next instant. By the next instant, about 1/10,000th of a second. What a person is experiencing, they are never experiencing reality. By the next instant, what a person is experiencing is the ego's interpretation of reality. Like an audio system, there is a monitor. So just as you record a program, the monitor feeds it into your ears. You heard what is just recorded a split second ago. But you are not hearing the program source. You are hearing what was just recorded. Most people experience the monitor tape of the ego's interpretation of events. Most people experience the monitor tape of the ego's interpretation of events. They are not experiencing events as they are in reality. They're experiencing the ego interpretation. Mentalization of the ego origin and its primary function is commentary. Mentalization is of egocentric origin. Mentalization is of egocentric origin. And its primary function is commentary. Unless requested through thought is vanity. An endless procession of opinions, rationalization, reprocessing, evaluating, and subtle judgment by which the thoughts are given value or importance via presumed significance because they are mine. The ego is enamored of its life story and its central character. That's probably the highlight of the book right there so far. That's a good one. Should I read it again? Leave in the comments below if I should read it again. The human mind without help. And if you're enjoying this reading, please like and please subscribe. Thank you. That the human mind without help is unable to tell truth from falsehood due to its own innate structure and design is so staggering in its discovery that is roughly comparable to the discovery by Copernicus that caused culture shock in the 16th century. Because of this single fact alone is confrontational to the average mind, it will probably not be welcomed or warmly greeted by those who profit from sophistry and its illusions. All in all, a good read. Stay tuned for next time. John Michael, Context is Everything Media Network. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on when you're watching. This is the book. At a publication. But is it worthwhile? Let me know in the comments. Bye-bye. God bless.